an upcoming documentary called Ball Side Middle that's going to be really interesting, especially to basketball junkies of New York City hoops like Dan and myself. It's going to focus on a period of time from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s of just a bunch of guys growing up playing basketball in Brooklyn.
It's not about the stats, it's about the experience. The result of the experience is NBA or college or productive citizens that raise kids.
The ball is what brings us there. The ball is our vehicle. The ball is the means to our end.
Ball was the key to life. It was the key that unlocked the world for me. It opened up the world.
Once we get the ball, then we could clear out any interference. When we do what? When we pass the ball to the side. So all the obstacles that may be in our way, in the middle of the court, we go around them.
And then in the middle is in your core, is this basketball that will never leave us. So my goal is to tell the story about very special times and people, because when I leave this planet and all of my buddies leave this planet, who's gonna tell their story? That era will be erased because no one will be around to tell the story. Yeah, there's some articles out there, there's a few pictures, but how the story goes, there's nobody going to be able to tell it. So that's my goal, to get this story out before this generation of people, my generation, leaves the planet.
There's time and timing. See, this is the time, but your timing is so on point.
For those of us who from 1975 to 1985 navigated the mean streets of New York City, Brooklyn in particular, from Fort Greene to Bushwick to Bed-Stuy to CI, our experiences mirror an important chapter of the Black American story.
I was fortunate enough, and I say fortunate, to be born in Brooklyn, New York. And you know, when I think about Brooklyn, New York, I don't know why we're so proud about Brooklyn. Like everywhere I go, it's like, I'm from Brooklyn, and we put an emphasis on it. And I don't care if I'm in Virginia, North Carolina, Vegas, wherever I go in this world, I am so proud of Brooklyn. Brooklyn, New York in 1960s is when I was born. I was born in 1962, so that was really probably in the, not necessarily the middle of the civil rights movement, but it was near the end. But what did I know? I was a little kid. My mom said I was born the year JFK was killed. And then in '68, when my sister was born, that's when Martin Luther King was killed. And I do remember at 6, 7 years old, the riots in Brooklyn that happened after Martin Luther King was killed. I do remember just the neighborhoods being destroyed and parents telling us not to go outside because it was just a lot going on.
The cry of black power is at bottom a reaction to the reluctance of white power to make the kind of changes necessary to make justice a reality for the Negro. I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the economic plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years.
But Brooklyn, as I remember as a kid, a lot of parks, a lot of basketball hoops, a lot of imagination. And I also remember growing up in Brooklyn and watching TV and for the first time seeing a program with all black people on it. And I was Soul Train. And it was like a family ritual. Saturday mornings, everything stops. We all go watch Soul Train. And then, of course, we try to dance like the Soul Train dancers. And I remember that. And everywhere I lived was a lot of kids. I lived in the projects. So there was always a bunch of kids on every single floor and every building next to you. And you had like your morning routines where you played with your boys and you did like Skelsy or flag football or two-hand touch or baseball or basketball with the garbage cans. But then in the afternoon, everybody hanging out in front of the building and, you know, whether you're cracking jokes, doing the latest dances or whatever, that was sort of our growing up. Brooklyn in those days, and even before, was designed for people like me, men like me. It was designed for us to fail. There was a lack of investment across the board. Bedford-Stuyvesant was an affluent neighborhood, mostly white, with factories and jobs and everything. There was a migration of blacks from the South to come get work because there was no work in the South. So they came up to New York and landed in New York City, and Brooklyn was one of those neighborhoods. In Bedford-Stuyvesant, there were jobs and they started working in the factories. So I'm assuming cheap labor, they were getting good jobs, but then they wanted to live in those communities. And so some of them started living in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So then the white people that lived there decided to leave.
Subconsciously really believes that the Negro is inferior. And this is wonderful because it makes all white people so superior. And you have this marvelous feeling of being just a little bit better than all these black people. And consequently, when you have the black people moving into your neighborhood, it suddenly, the bottom drops out. I mean, if these people can move in, then obviously your neighborhood is no longer really very valuable to you.
But then they closed down the businesses. Now the blacks don't have jobs. So now it goes from a thriving community to a poor community. And then after all that, Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of John F. Kennedy, came and visited and said, what's going on here? I want to see what's going on in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So he came up with something called restoration, which is to restore a neighborhood.
The senator says that he realizes because of Vietnam, there isn't enough federal money to rehabilitate Bedford-Stuyvesant. Senator Kennedy and his staff have developed a new bipartisan program aimed at breathing new life into the area. Simply put, the plan is a systematic attack on urban poverty, starting with the idea of convincing private enterprise to invest massively in the ghetto.
When you take kindergarten kids and put them on a bus for an hour and a half, now, when they got a school they could walk to 5 minutes away, now that's wrong. It's wrong for the white children, it's wrong for the black children.
One of the toughest times, the toughest experiences I've ever had is racism as a result of desegregation busing. So this busing thing is on the heels of Brown versus Board of Education, which was supposed to desegregate the schools. A lot of arguments on whether it should have been done or should be done. But they figure, hey, blacks wanted to be integrated with whites because whites had better schools and better resources.
The board has begun a saturation program, doubling education services in ghetto areas where Negro children have not had the opportunity to achieve as well as white children.
So at 12 years old, I was a product of busing. I completed my public school up to 6th grade. I'm now entering my 7th grade. And as a 7th grader, I now have to go to school 10 to 15 miles away from my house. And it required that I leave the project, walk 3 long blocks to catch a city bus, not a yellow school bus. And as we traveled through the neighborhood in the early days, we welcomed a pretty neighborhood, beautiful houses, they were well kept. Coming from the projects, it was pretty cool. But I noticed that all of us would become less talkative and it would get really quiet. We felt like we were somewhere where we didn't belong. Almost like freedom riders.
White and black people are never going to get along, so they should just stay apart,
Like kids from this neighbor go over here. Why can't they go over here? They're busting all the niggas in here.
We got kids from East New York, Flatbush, Brownsville, and Bedford-Stuyvesant being bused to this particular junior high school that I went to. And we're on our way home, and then we hit that turn where people can get on the bus, and we noticed there's some high school kids on the bus, about 7. They were standing there just staring at us. And the next thing you know, they started hitting us, and they had brass knuckles, and they commenced to just beating our asses. We were shocked. Nobody expected that.
The craziness of the white boys, running you home.
Right. We got chased home from practice at least 3 days a week.
Right.
Once you got past Flatlands,
you
had to be worried about you just gonna roll a bunch of cars with baseball bats.
Absolutely.
I went to a rally. We went to Midwood, FDR and stuff. I had a 45 in my bag. That's what we actually did back,
The last day, I graduated from the school in 8th grade, and I decided to go back to get my report card. Me and about 6 friends, we go up there early in the day, and we're trying to get back home, and there's no special. So it's a regular bus. So we get on the regular bus, but we see these white kids coming at us and picking up the pace, and they coming out. We say, okay, here we go. We can't even leave the school in peace. And as it get closer, fortunately, the bus comes, we jump on the bus. And then they pull out a BB gun, bust out all the windows. We hit, glass hitting me, hitting all of us. And we're like, oh my God, now we gotta get off this bus, because when the bus gets damaged, we gotta get off. And now we know we're getting ready to fight. And they got a weapon. Bus driver, he said, I'm not gonna let nothing happen to y'all. We just gonna keep going, keep down, keep down, keep down. And he drove us out of there and got us to our community. I vowed to never, ever step foot on that campus again because of all the racism I experienced at 12, 13 years old.
New York had many of its own perils. Remember, this 10-year period is the bridge between the end of the tragic Vietnam War and heroin addiction plague and the beginning of the epically violent crack cocaine epidemic. And for those of us who were there, trapped in between, who watched our family and friends get swallowed up, only we know what that felt like.
There was no investment. There was no plan for us to be successful. Why did they put money into restoration? Because they wanted to decrease the violence. Why did they build so many playgrounds and parks? Because they want to see where we're at. They took away after school centers in the 70s because, New York City went into a default, had a financial crisis. The first thing they did, they went into our communities and killed all the programs. This was a very tough time for us. I finally got an opportunity to go to the parks. And I used to go to the parks with my dad. My dad played a lot of pickup ball at Foster Park, which is a very famous park. And when I got there, everything was big. It had 6 or 7 courts. The rim was high, 10 feet high. I'm used to playing on garbage cans.
When we used to come out here to Foster Park,
right after work, you had to wait online. You know how Foster was. I mean, we throwing the little kids off the court and throwing the big guys, you know, but that's how they learn.
For years, we had the great ballers, but a lot of great ballers didn't come to Foster Park because of the element. We had a lot of gangsters, cats shooting right on the court.
Fly Williams. Oh, man, Mike Dunleavy, Chris Mullins, all them came through Foster Park.
We had some good battles, but we all still love each other. You know, once you on the court is something, when you off the court is all love, man. So,
and you lose, it's over. Because the next was so long. You know what I'm saying? Like, they got me lined up 15 deep. Yeah, and if you ain't got no name, they don't know you, you ain't gonna get picked.
There was a book written about the park, Heaven is a Playground. And it featured Fly Williams, who was legendary. It featured a lot of guys from my era, Eric Short, Mark Bailey. These guys were in this particular book. One of the features in there was a gentleman by the name of Rodney Parker.
Rodney Parker, he was a jewel. Rodney Parker loved basketball, had one of the most amazing brains ever.
You know, what I'm doing is just a small drop in the bucket compared to what needs to be done. I mean, I may put 15, 20 kids a year in school, you know. There's hundreds that need it, you know. And I just picked the chosen few, the kid that happens to be better than the next kid, the kid that happens to jump higher, quicker, shoots better.
well, Ronnie used to take me all over and play different places, and he sent a lot of people away to school. He just was a good dude. He loved the game.
He helped hundreds of kids with no money, not asking for no money. All he wanted to know is if you wanted to go and you love basketball. That's all.
You can tell in the way they play, it's like the whole life is depending on that basketball game. It's like all they had, really.
He was providing opportunities for young men, and the colleges were investing in unknown product. These were guys that mostly dropped out of high school or played 1 or 2 years of high school. They weren't all city, they weren't all Brooklyn. They were just, average good basketball players that just needed opportunity. If you could play a little bit and you wanted to go away, he would try to help you.
I just came into the playground before, and the kid comes over to me and says he wants to go to school. I get letters, I get kids calling me up all the time. I get recommendations. Everybody wants a chance. Whether it's fair or unfair, that's up to the individual. I do the best I can. I get them all they can get.
So at the age of about 11, we had a cop that came to the neighborhood named Dennis Fitzgerald. He was the only white guy that came into the park, all these brothers in the park, and he organized us. He did it all under the auspices of the PAL, Police Athletic League. So we used to practice at the precinct in the wintertime, but in the summer, we practiced at Foster Park. For 30 years of my life, I lived in Brooklyn. Born and raised there, learned the game of basketball, met a lot of people. And at 30, I decided to leave. And I pretty much left because the crack epidemic was going crazy. And I said, I can't raise my kids here. At that age, I wanted to raise my family, and I couldn't raise them. I had just had a son in 1989, and I said, he can't grow up in this environment. It's not the Brooklyn I knew in the late 60s, mid 70s, early 80s. I can honestly say the reason why I have to tell this story is not for gratification of Craig Boothe. I owe it to Brooklyn. I owe everything to every experience I had, good, bad, or indifferent, to Brooklyn. And I leave Brooklyn at 30, and I spend the next almost 25, 26 years giving Brooklyn to people in Virginia. That is why I'm giving this story to Brooklyn, because Brooklyn made me, saved me. So when I looked at anchoring the documentary, where do I start? I'm born in the 60s, early 60s, started playing ball, 68, 69. Knicks was winning the championship. Oh man, the good old days. 72, the Knicks win the championship for the last time. And literally, I had an epiphany, and it has to start at the most important location during that era, where it was sort of the central hub for basketball, and it was a place called St. John's Recreation Center in Brooklyn, New York. And St. John's sits in the middle of Bedford-Stuyvesant, and everything basketball happens at St. John's Recreation Center, and adjacent to it, St. John's Park. And at the age of 11, I got exposed to that location. And from that point on, my life changed when it came to organized basketball. And then I eventually go down in 9th grade and I become a team member. And my basketball career starts taking off. I start getting better. I start getting more confidence. So I said, that's a good place to anchor the story. So if I'm going to talk about St. John's Recreation Center or St. John's Park and all the tournaments and the teams and the activities that were going on down there, then I got to talk about Lester Roberts. Ordained the godfather of Brooklyn basketball. And I don't think anybody has ever been ordained that title since. Not as long as I've been living. He is the godfather, or let's just say was, the godfather of Brooklyn basketball. Now, Lester grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And, you know, he's born in the 30s, somewhere around there. Not specific to exactly when he was born, but Lester loved to play basketball. And Lester was known for doing what old school dudes did back in those days. They learned how to shoot basketball set shots with 2 hands. Lester used to hustle guys for shots, you know, make money. I guess they were shooting for quarters and things. Now, I'm telling you, in the 60s, 70s, quarters was a lot of money. You know, you get a quarter, you can get a whole lot with a quarter.
Well, Lester was the most organized guy I ever saw. Everything was in order. And what Lester did that endeared everyone to him, he always made you feel a part of it. He made kids feel a part of it. He never called you by your name. Everybody to him was Rook.
He might not, he just see you walking. He just, come here, Rook. And he called everybody Rook. Come here, Rook. And you go over to him. You got a lot of dummy in you, son. You know that, right? Just crack you up and make you laugh.
I met Lester at 14 years old. It was the end of my freshman year of high school, and that summer I went down to try out for one of his teams. And I made his team.
Oh man, Lester was the best. You know, Lester was a really good person. You know, had a great heart and love for people.
Let's just say Lester got the party started. He created the citywide youth basketball organization, ultimately the citywide basketball tournament. Now, citywide, imagine the word citywide, it means that the entire city eventually participated in this tournament. Now, what made it so big was, think about it, New York City probably back in those days had 5-6 million people. Brooklyn was considered the 4th largest city in all of America, but Brooklyn's not a city. Brooklyn's a borough. So Lester was able to create an event that all the city participated in. And ultimately, when you did well and you got to the championship, you were playing at a college, and then eventually you were playing at Madison Square Garden, where the Knicks play.
Citywide basketball was the greatest tournament that we ever had in the city of New York. And I say that because all the talent in New York was able to play. You could go to school and be academically ineligible to play in school, but in citywide, everybody could play. You saw everybody. You saw guys like Ricky Sobers. We would have never saw Ricky Sobers. Ricky Sobers didn't play high school basketball. And he went on to NBA. He had a great college and NBA career. It was because of citywide basketball.
Brooklyn citywide was the bomb. So again, at 11 years old, I played in my first tournament, which was Brooklyn citywide. I'd go down there, I think we had a weeknight game, and it was packed. You know, so citywide was a big thing, but he's thought through citywide, I can teach people how to keep the scorebook. I can teach people how to referee, because Lester was odd, because as much as he loved coaching, he also loved refereeing. And most guys will tell you, they don't want to referee. Most coaches hate referees. They don't like referees. Their job, they think, is when they go to a game, their job is to argue with the referee. So Lester was showing them, if you want to be a great coach, you need to learn how to referee.
So I go to Lester. I said, Lester, I want to coach. He said, okay, you got to go to referee school. I go, Lester, I don't want to referee. I want to coach. And he goes, no, you have to go to referee school. And so me and Lester going at it, and he tells me, he said, listen, you got to go to referee school so you can learn the rules. Because what you think you know, you don't know. He got me into refereeing. And I've been refereeing basketball for 32 years because of Lester Roberts.
And Lester told me, if you want to be the best coach, then you have to learn how to referee. I said, I don't want to be an official. He said, I don't want you to be an official. But at least you're going to know the rules and you're able to talk to guys. They look at you differently. You know, people look at me differently because I'm able to talk to them about things that happen on the court, not just gibberish.
Now, Lester also, as a referee, he spent a lot of hours teaching people how to ref. He's breaking the game down, which most successful referees would tell you. They spend most of their time analyzing what just happened during the game. So Lester's doing that because he's got Citywide going on, and he's also got a big organization that he built. First one he built was Sports Unlimited. But the reason why Lester and his partner, Timmy Vincent, we have to give him some credit, created Sports Unlimited was because there was funding coming to the city. So Timmy Vincent was very astute and knowledgeable about all the opportunities to fund youth programs. See, when we played youth basketball, not one youth paid $1 to play in anything. Whereas today, parents are paying thousands of dollars for their child to play because the world has changed. Nobody's giving money to youth like they used to. Now, Lester and Timmy creates Sports Unlimited, that ultimately they create a store, Sports Unlimited, which uniformed everybody. Now, Lester's genius and Timmy's genius kind of morphed into Brooklyn, USA. What I've learned is that Brooklyn, USA was created because of the bicentennial. And the bicentennial was the 200th anniversary of America. That bicentennial gave Timmy and Lester the opportunity to create Brooklyn, USA, and more funding for the program.
So what Lester did, he put together a group of coaches to coach at every level. He had Coach Lloyd, Coach Biddies and Midgets. He had Rapelyea, who coached high school. He had Tony Suarez, who coached college, pro-am. Billy Thompson, who coached high school. And then he had a guy like me who assisted all of them.
Lester was the guy who pretty much started Brooklyn, USA. And he had so much respect from Ray Lloyd and everyone else who was involved. He was the pyramid of knowledge that everybody drew from.
Oh man, Lester, I tell you what, he was the heart and soul of Brooklyn, USA. Everyone knew Lester. He was pretty straightforward. He was a hell of a coach. Lester was sort of the foundation for Brooklyn, USA. He got you in there and then he kept you.
Brooklyn, USA, Sports is the greatest organization in the world, and I was happy to be part of that at a very young age.
We were taught to play hard and play together, and we did it.
Always played man-to-man defense, trapping defense, and pressure defense, and so, you know, it was no big guys, small guys, whatever. Everybody was the same, and I benefited from that.
Winning all day, every day, every tournament. I'd be like, is we ever gonna lose? Come on now.
Every championship game, we playing Brooklyn, USA. Brooklyn, USA was tearing our ass up every championship game. Yeah, that's what we did.
Now, when Brownsville played on Brooklyn, USA, during that time, Cosell, Skeet, Cosell. Now, every time we played them, they beat us no more than 2 points. Then we come back, beat them by 1. Now, if we played them 2 out of 3, they beat us 2 out of 3.
We were so organized and we played so hard that teams literally lost the game before the game started.
They knew who we were before we came to play with them.
That's right.
We had already played well against them.
All the time.
And it wasn't like it was a one-way street. Me and him, we battled. Me and Cosell, we battled. Me and Fred French, we battled. It was just a battle, and everybody had their own thing, their own special thing that they were good at. And Lloyd and Ray and Lester, to their great insight, they knew that when we came that we would add something to the mix too. So it was never a thing of whether we was gonna get playing time. We fought for playing time and we bust those guys' ass. We bust each other's ass in practice.
And then the same thing with Brownsville, with Jocko, Jonesy, Dean, Willie Hall, same thing. You know what I'm saying?
We couldn't play if we didn't wear jock strap. That's right.
Remember that?
Once a little compression short, the coach would be like, yo,
Let's talk about that,
look,
fellas. Talk about the culture.
Look, they'll walk behind you and pop it. What? Nuh-uh. Yo, get out of here.
No Fruity Loops.
Right.
No Fruity
I'm telling
Loops.
you, there's no compression shorts. There was all that fly shit. You're not playing in your underwear. Get out of here. Right. You're having right. Coach. Yeah. Right or wrong? Right. All right. I'm 10, 11 years old. What I got to put in the goddamn jacket? But you bet your ass I had 10, 15 of them. There you go.
But Lester was able to bring Nike through Rodney Parker, who is a great gem in Brooklyn. He was able to bring Nike to Brooklyn, USA. And Lester's organization, Brooklyn USA, was the first organization that Nike ever sponsored. We didn't know who Nike was. I mean, I was rocking Chuck Taylors. Most of my friends rock Chuck Taylors, and if you got a little bit of money, you'll rock some Dr. J's, the leather version. Now, Lester's doing extremely well. He's got Brooklyn USA going. He's got Citywide going. And he's got this brand new referee organization that him and some of the other African-American referees decided to put together. It's called Saboa. Now, Saboa is reffing all the tournaments in Brooklyn. And Lester's using this platform to train officials and develop officials to one day climb the ladder, to get an opportunity to ref in college and also to ref in the NBA. Now, if you dial the clock back into the 70s and the lack of representation African-American basketball officials at the NBA or at the NCAA, wasn't many of us. It was like a sprinkle here and there. So seeing the unfair treatment and the unfair opportunity, Lester and the Saboa gang, let's call them that, get together with some other officials, because there now is a Saboa in Manhattan and the Bronx, so now Saboa is big. And they said, let's petition. Let's petition the NBA, let's petition the NCAA and say, hey, we need more representatives. We have some great officials here in New York City that can ref those games. We ref those games every single day. So it's a huge petition. And to my understanding, lawyers got involved. And when the lawyers got involved, they decide to settle. NBA doesn't want this to get out in the papers. That's why there's no court documents. There's nothing out there that actually you could research to say, did this really happen? But there are many witnesses to it. The interesting thing, though, the petition that went into those offices was supposed to be signed by all of the gang, the Saboa gang. And only one official put his name on the dotted line. And that official was Lester Roberts. Now, the NBA settles, and when the NBA settles, what happens? They give an opportunity for African Americans. So they bring in a vice president of basketball officials development. Everybody could have assumed that Lester was going to get the job. Lester didn't get the job.
They could not use Lester as the test case because Lester wasn't a college graduate. So they could always use that. So they used Cecil Watkins, who was a college graduate.
the way he organized, the way he was able to train people to keep the books, the clocks, the stats, the way he was able to train coaches and train referees, his ability to execute, you would have thought he had his PhD. But he didn't. He was a high school dropout. They used that to eliminate him. So they could say, hey, we love you, Lester, and now here you one hell of a referee, and you've developed a lot of guys, but you gotta have your degree. So it actually could be both things. I can eliminate you on paper because you don't have the degree, but actually I'm pissed off at you because you came at us. And I would say Cecil did a very good job as far as bringing in African-American talent to the referees in the NBA. And two Brooklynites really benefited from this program. One was Ronnie Nunn, who went to Brooklyn Tech High School, was a star basketball player back in the 70s, and then eventually goes on and plays in college Division I basketball. And then he gets this opportunity to become a NBA ref, and he refs like 20 plus years and becomes the supervisor of all referees for the NBA for a number of years. And one other was Mike Henderson. Mike Henderson, Brooklyn guy, went to Wingate High School, and he played D2 ball at CW Pulse. Then he kind of fell into refereeing and did pretty well and had a good career as an NBA ref. And those two guys from Brooklyn were part of the referees that sort of diversified the NBA.
So that opened doors for us. The little small things, a lot of people didn't know about that. But that's how progress is made. And where did it start? A guy like Lester Robinson, community guy.
So now Lester's hurt by this situation, and Lester's gotta sort of figure out, like, I don't wanna be in this situation ever again. I don't wanna be eliminated from a dream, a goal, whether it's to be a coach or a referee, just because of my, lack of education. So Lester strikes gold, in my opinion. He gets to go and coach at a junior college and also attend and get his GED and then ultimately his associate's degree while at that junior college. But that junior college was not in New York. He had to go to Kansas.
When Lester left, that was the heart, that was the rock of the organization. So that's how we kind of fell apart a little bit, not having Lester there to guide us, you know what I mean? But not, so it kind of hurt us. And when we look back on it, you know what I mean? Because if Lester don't leave, then I think, we still up in the organization, whatnot. Because he was the backbone, you know what I mean? He was our leader, whatnot, you know what I mean? And you use your leader, things start changing. Not knowing that was gonna happen, but it did.
He was the godfather, and you know what a godfather is? The godfather is the leader. He led everything, citywide, Saboa, Wheelchair Classic, which was the ultimate high school all-star game, founded by Hank Carter in Queens, brought to Lester Roberts to be organized and developed and to get the players. And Hank Carter credits Lester for its success.
So Lester says to me, and I never forgot that, he says to me, Hank, I'm not coming back no more. And I said, what do you mean you're not coming back, Les? He says, you don't need no more. I said, Les, we're always gonna need you. Because if it wasn't for you, we won't be here right now.
So he's in Kansas, and now he has an opportunity from Dale Brown, who's one of the top college coaches at the time at LSU. He's got an opportunity to go to Louisiana.
Dale Brown did that because he knew Lester Roberts was the man for Brooklyn, USA. And he wanted that connection so that he could come in and recruit kids out of Brooklyn, USA. Things didn't work out. He hooked Lester Roberts up with a guy from the Parks Department in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The guy takes Lester, doesn't know anything about him, but he takes him on his word, puts Lester in the center, and the center he had, like we have this is St. John's Park. St. John's Park for New York City is huge. But down in Baton Rouge, this is a doorway, that's all. In Baton Rouge, he had football, soccer, baseball, track, swimming. He had everything, boys and girls. But what Lester did was went down there, he just showed out.
See, the difference is when Lester was at St. John's, Lester didn't work there. So now he can go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and get the keys and be given an opportunity with funding and facilities, and to be able to take his St. John's visions, his visions for Brooklyn, and expand it threefold.
What he did for Brooklyn, USA was unbelievable. But what he did for Baton Rouge was 100 times more.
He created a life for himself bigger than what he had at St. John's.
Lester was the king of kings among us.
Right.
And since God, Lester may have been the most important person that New York City ever had.
Lester Roberts had many proteges, and one of the biggest little proteges was Lloyd McCrory. He was big as far as responsibility, but he was a little guy in stature. But Lloyd was one hell of a basketball player. He has a huge reputation at Boys High back in the day. But after Lloyd stopped playing basketball, he got into coaching, and he started hanging around Lester, and he lived right across the street from St. John's Recreation Center, so had no choice but to run into Lester. Now, Lloyd, being a protege of Lester, he was given an opportunity to learn how to ref, to learn how to coach, and to just be up under him for all his little visionary things like Brooklyn USA and Sports Unlimited and all these other things.
Lloyd is the starter. Every race, you need somebody to start. You need that one person to start, that one person to shoot the gun, that one person that brings all the athletes together. And that was Lloyd.
Lloyd has been there forever. He has seen all the kids from the biddies on up.
Out of the top 15 high school players in Brooklyn, I believe 12 of them Lloyd had coached.
Lloyd brought in all the kids. He brought in Ice, he brought in Boothe, he brought in Cosell, Albert King, all those guys. Because Lloyd has the perfect makeup to deal with young kids, to make them feel at ease.
He had relationships with guys since they were 10 years old. And the way he disciplined them, the way he taught them the game, nobody thought that these young kids at that age would learn the game at that level.
You know, I owe everything to Lloyd, you know. Lloyd was a great coach, good person, really cared about the kids. He gave up, like, sort of his, you know, life, personal life, to spend a lot of time with us.
Lester, Lloyd, they were both my Obamas because they taught me about life. They took care of me. You know, they nurtured me. They gave me all the understandings to be a grown man at the age of 12.
Lloyd has motivated a lot of kids, kept them out of trouble, kept them on the right path, showed them that, hey, there's a way to do it.
I was teaching passing drills. Right. I was teaching how to make the layups. Right. You know what I'm saying? I was teaching everything that you need to have if you're gonna play basketball.
It was like he built us from the ground up. You know, we started with the basic fundamentals and practices and passing and shooting and layups.
You know, he looked like one of the homeboys, but he always had like a real serious face, like always analyzing and, you know, looking at talent and looking at the game, but a heck of a teacher.
Lloyd taught me the game from scratch. You know what I'm saying? I did 3 seconds, you know, backcourt, you know, I learned everything.
Lloyd McCrory made Cosell who Cosell is today. You know, because without him, I still would have been me. But my abilities may not have been there. He made me great.
Well, I mean, I had the benefit of growing up across the street from the park where I could come outside and play 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night because my mom could look out the window. And we were playing with the lights on. We had Kurt, we had Kel, we had Brother, Rodney. We would come out and meet 10, 11 o'clock at night and play. So, I mean, I had that benefit where you have a lot of kids, they don't have a park. They don't have a recreation center. They don't have Coach Lloyd. Like Boothe said, we learned the game. We was taught how to take charges. We was taught how to pass with our left hand, bounce pass, chest pass. We was taught this thing at 10 years old. So we were ahead of our time.
But he wasn't a loud guy, right? He was kind of smooth with it.
His demeanor probably is the reason they call me Ice, because he was a cool coach. He explained stuff to you. He'll pull you to the side during a game and whisper in your ear what you're doing wrong.
Lloyd never really raised his voice. He was always cool and calm and quiet. That was just his demeanor, you know. So that's one thing I kind of liked about him, you know, that he always handled himself well under pressure.
He was probably the most impacted by Lester Roberts leaving Brooklyn. Again, being under his wing and Lester giving him so much responsibility and Lester depending on Lloyd so much to take care of the players and develop the youth. And Lloyd was very good at developing young players. When Lester left, it hurt him, but it didn't discourage him. This man's been working at that gym, St. John's Recreation Center, for 50 years. And I believe the first 10 to 12 years, he was a volunteer. And the rest of the time, he's been working there, directing basketball leagues, basketball tournaments, giving opportunity for all the talent to play. He doesn't cut anyone. He lets everybody play. Everybody gets an opportunity.
From the age 12 to 18 that I was involved with Brooklyn USA, I think that was what made me into a professional basketball player.
They should name this park after Lloyd.
Yep.
Put a monument in front of the building. Put a monument in front of the building, Coach Lloyd. You know, Coach Lloyd. I can't say no more, man. I don't know where I would be if I didn't have St. John's. Love you, Lloyd.
Jump from the rock in the middle of the night.
Jump from the rock in the middle of the night.
I make a head call and I'm ready to fight.
I make a head call and I'm ready to fight.
Low Rapelyea.
Low Rapelyea.
Left Rapelyea.
Left Rapelyea.
Low Rapelyea.
Low Rapelyea.
Left foot right low.
Left foot right low.
Here we come.
Here we come.
Drill instructor.
Drill instructor.
My junior year of high school, I was blessed with the opportunity to meet a man named Gil Reynolds. His journey and his story is very interesting. As Lester Roberts has touched me, he touched Gil Reynolds when Gil Reynolds was a softball coach. Now this man is a former military guy and he's coaching softball down at St. John's. And Lester and Gil are friends, and Lester says, you need to come coach some of these youth in basketball.
He was definitely like Sarge in The Soldier Story. And all of those who don't know The Soldier Story, shame on you, go watch the movie. But he was very, very, very good for us.
Muscular, diesel, cut,
Great physical shape.
and didn't smile at all.
Let me tell you what's so special about Gil. You know, back then, most of us had both our parents with us. And back then, we had discipline in the home. You know, we couldn't do certain things. You know, these guys now do whatever they want. Gil actually gave you that outside of the home.
Gil Reynolds was crazy. He was violent.
Now this is what happens. He put the guys out there to scrimmage. Then after the scrimmage, put everybody against the wall, and he was talking. So me and my friend was talking amongst ourselves. So Gil came up to us and punched both of us in the knee. Boom! I was like, yo, what's wrong with this guy, man? He said, no. He said, when I'm talking, nobody talks. Then he asked me my name. I told him. He said, where do you go to school? I said, Canarsie. He said, oh, with that Mark Reiner. I don't like him. That's what he said.
He instilled work ethic, discipline, had to be at his practice on time. You had to be at every practice. And he was no nonsense.
He wasn't accepting just anybody. And you had to be a certain personality to be able to play with this man. Because I've seen him punch a couple of guys. And I remember their drill, he hold the ball in your hand, he hold the ball out. You're supposed to be in the defensive stands. And he hold the ball out. If you don't smack that ball in your hand, out of his hand, you got a problem. I see a guy was in defensive stance, Gil had the ball out in his hand, out like this, and then Gil stood up because the guy didn't smack the ball out of his hand. Gil said, "Bow!" Smacked the boy in the face with the ball.
Gil is responsible for developing and giving those guys and pouring into them the that you need to play at that level.
He would yell, I would listen. He was mostly teaching, and he was just always wanting everybody to know, pay attention to him, be fearful of him, don't be fearful of this, don't get out there in the street. I just love that he would constantly give us all of that energy and time.
Gil was altogether different. The other thing Gil had that I don't think anyone had is the respect. Each borough, everyone knew Gil, man.
Gil Reynolds was probably the only coach that people would come out to the park to watch coach. You know, I mean, people would come out, so-and-so might be playing, it didn't matter. If Gil was there, he brought a crowd just to watch him coach. You know, and the last thing you wanted to do was get embarrassed.
That's true.
Because that walk to the bench after you done threw that bad pass, that was like probably the longest walk you ever take.
One thing about Coach was the younger guys, he taught. Right. The older guys should know better. He would teach you individual skills, but the basic fundamentals, he felt like he could be playing another kid that he can give more time to rather than teaching the kid a layup.
He would say, I'm not going to give you all these things you guys think you're supposed to have, sneakers, shirts, and everything, but what I'm going to do is give you knowledge. I'm not like those guys like Louis Dalmato or that other guy in that Riverside Church. What you're going to get from me, you're going to get knowledge.
Gil becomes the most instrumental basketball coach of the era. He has developed more NBA players out of Brooklyn than any other coach.
I seen him be surrogate fathers to kids. I seen that. I saw that for my own. I saw guys that wasn't going to school that was going to school because they thought, you know, coach had an opportunity to send them to college. I've seen it firsthand, him changing people's lives.
Everyone wanted to play for Gil.
And Gil would have us in that gym 3 hours and talk about spacing, hit the open man, be able to dribble and throw the ball off the dribble when everybody else is telling you, don't pass like that. When everybody else is telling you, don't be creative with your game.
He was really focused on getting the guys to be the best that they can be.
You made me physically a monster. Don't back down from nobody. I don't care how big they are. You see what I'm saying? So now I took that with me. Like, yo, Gil said I could do it. Boom. So I'm like going against guys 6'8", 6'9", pushing them around. So I was like, oh, I said, okay, Gil was right.
I mean, his resume includes Bernard King, Hall of Famer, Albert King, NBA player, Lorenzo Charles, NCAA champ, NBA player, John Sally, NBA champ, college All-American, high school All-American, Pearl Washington, NBA player, Jeff Houston, NBA player, World Be Free, NBA player, Jocko Jackson, NBA player, Sid Green, NBA player. As impactful as he was, it's sad to say, and I may be the only one that will say it, that we did not celebrate his life the way it should be celebrated. You know, Gil Reynolds, Lester Roberts, Ray Haskins, Ted Gussis, all these guys should have some sort of statue and a park named after them. The fact that he gave those guys whatever the medicine or the ingredient they needed to succeed at the highest level, he sort of died as if he never existed. But he is a name that if you say Gil Reynolds and you played in that era, he was simply the best coach during that era. So when Gil leaves to create Vanguard Oilers, the restoration program was picked up by George Murden, who is a disciple of Gil Reynolds. So Murden takes care of the youth there that decided to stay and continue to develop in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Murden takes over the program. Murden was about developing the character of individuals. So the team that he had and the players that he had, which were very successful, they went up to Rucker and won the high school division of Rucker 2 years in a row, which is very hard to do. But Murden spent a lot of time developing their character, their leadership qualities. He was a person that definitely coached lives, more so than just players. So he is definitely another one of those unique individuals that should be cemented into the history of Brooklyn basketball.
You think it's just about a basketball game? A basketball game? I'm like Allen Iverson. You're talking about practice. Yeah. You're talking about a basketball game when someone don't even have food to eat. You're talking about a basketball game when a kid doesn't know how he's going to get his education. You're talking about a basketball game when you got drugs and people getting shot around his community. Those are things that are very important. So the coaches got to get away from just wanting to win games and win lives.
This man had no resources. So what does he do? He goes to the park, gets a permit, and locks down the park, all the courts, and he runs camps and clinics. He takes guys that can't play, takes guys that can play. He could take a kid that only knew soccer and wanted to play basketball and turn him into an NBA player. We're talking about Rolando Blackman.
I was 2 blocks from my house at the end of my leash. So I wasn't gonna be going to Foster Park. Ted was there and had the knowledge, showed the care, had the trust of the neighborhood. All the parents understood exactly what was happening, that what this guy was doing with our kids before and after school with that kind of a thing. And Ted's own personality just had you gravitate toward that because he gave a damn. He cared.
Ted was a community coach. A community coach has an advantage over somebody who may have went to school and then they just come and coach. We coach in the community first.
He transferred the information that he would share with us is something that could be transferable and duplicatable. That's what's different in a lot of different coaches. When you really coach, that means you have other coaches that's done what you've done.
I mean, Ted played at Canarsie High School, one of the top high schools during the era. And Ted was teammates with World B. Free and Jeff Houston. He played with guys that can hoop. And Ted was just phenomenal, and he had humble beginnings.
I was learning basketball, yes, but I was also learning about life. Sit up, speak to people, just make sure you do your homework, get your stuff together. I was looking at everything that he said, listening to everything that he said when he said to put the ball down, but get your head up. You know what I mean? Switch from hand, feel the ball. Don't be stiff with it. You know what I mean? Move your shoulders, have the opportunity to move. Just every inflection.
He could take a skinny kid who didn't play in many tournaments or anything and turn him into a NBA champion. I'm talking about John Sally.
When I got to Ted Gustis, I never forget this. He goes, when you're on your left here, you gotta step on the roach with your left foot first, and then step on the other roach with the right foot, and then jump over the other one. So literally, I would dribble with my left hand, step on the left roach, step on the right roach, jumper. That's how I I know it sounds so crazy. Ted probably gonna be like, I didn't say that. You said it.
Not only where you had to be there in the morning because you had to get up and come in the morning to go play, but it was teaching the different principles also too. Be on time, respect, value your parents, this and that and the other, while teaching you the game. Ted gave you what, if you want more, Ted was there to give you more, using all of his time before, after. I don't know how he had so much time to be in the neighborhood to being able to help, but he just didn't help me. He was helping all the rest of the guys in the neighborhood too.
Life wasn't easy for Ted, but Ted took negatives and turned them into positives by giving back to the community. Then he goes on and comes out of the park in the playground, gets a high school job, becomes a phenomenal high school coach. One of the first black coaches to coach at a private school, Nazareth High School. Then he coaches at Bishop Loughlin. Then he becomes the PSAL director, which is the Public School Athletic League. He becomes in charge of all the high school ball in Brooklyn.
Barney Davis introduced me to this ball. And the reason why he introduced me to this ball is because it was a time when Martin Luther King had just gotten killed. And basically, we was out there rioting, beating up people, Hispanic people thinking they white. We didn't give it though, we just was going crazy. And he was a young coach at 22 years old, and but he was smart enough to introduce me to this. I started playing this game in the 8th grade, started playing. One summer it took me, and I was hooked.
The important things that Ted filled in those times were just completely impactful, life-saving. It gave me the path and the opportunity to move forward, not only in the game, but also in life, to being able to see a future.
But along the way, he's still doing entrepreneurial stuff. He's motivating, he's coaching lives. He creates this One Breath campaign. He's all over the place, just trying to keep messaging and helping people do better. And he's an author, I'm an author. He's a motivator, I'm a motivator. I got him beat though, I'm a filmmaker, he hasn't done that yet. I'm sure he'll do that real soon. But Ted is a phenomenal treasure that Brooklyn loves and will always appreciate.
There used to be 30 banks in the area when I was a kid. Now there's only 2 in Brownsville. Any other neighborhood, you wouldn't see that. You'll see people that may be coming from work or coming from business to business and doing their thing, but these people are having a rough time. And that's the problem. So why you see so much high crime in this area? Because there's no jobs in this area.
Brownsville, Brooklyn is a pretty tough place. And living in East New York, I was right next to Brownsville. And the place to play was the BRC, the Brownsville Recreation Center. But when you think about the BRC, you think about Jocko Jackson.
Former NBA player Greg Jocko Jackson has made it his mission to turn what used to be a playground of violence into a safe, welcoming environment.
So in 1997, I came in with a new plan, with a new team, with new ideas and new ambitions, and I had a chance to do it. And mainly it worked because I'm from the neighborhood.
So what does he do? He invests in the community. He started building community things. He creates the Brownsville Jets, thanks to Lester Roberts. But at the end of the day, Brownsville becomes better.
Ranked the #1 rec in New York City by the Parks Department, this center is recognized as an important asset, not only to Brownsville, but to Brooklyn.
But when you're on the streets, it's a different thing because you're in danger of getting hurt or killed. So I think this is a good place where project kids could come here and chill out.
If you're gonna talk about, Greg Jocko Jackson, it has to be about the things he did here. I mean, this building is a small part of it, and the building is a beautiful place. And there's so many things for so many people. The community that he helped change, or he was trying to fight to change.
Here we have the highest crime in the city, so you want those kids in the building.
Crime in the area has declined tremendously since Jocko and his team of friends took over, making a crucial turn for the better.
We're just trying to force it. We got to force feed people. We got to force feed them hope, because hope left a long time ago. Now we got to get it back to the neighborhood, you know?
He starts creating activities. He starts improving what we have. And I don't know if Jocko created it, but he damn sure blew it up, which was Brownsville Old Timers Day, which really becomes the godfather of all Brooklyn reunions. Now, sadly, Jocko left us early. Jocko died at a young age, and it really hurt the community because it was unexpected. And he was really doing big things, and he was really trying to, change the community. I know a lot of young people today, they look at Nipsey Hussle and they see what he was doing, and his unfortunate death is like, man, here's somebody invested in the community, building the community out, and he has an unfortunate, untimely death. Jocko was not murdered, but Jocko did leave the planet early due to a health issue, and it was like a big letdown because he had so much momentum, so many good things going. I recall when I would come back to visit and I would talk to Jocko about the things I'm doing in Virginia, and he applauded and he kept saying, keep pushing on, keep doing the things that you're doing. We need a lot more young brothers.
First walk in the door, I want them to feel this beautiful, bright, friendly atmosphere that we try to, produce here.
A lot of things that Dow does and Jocko used to do, they feed the community. When we were up there during this COVID season and people didn't have meals, Dow was running a big program and they had to shut the gym down so they could house the meals that they were giving to the Brownsville community. Dow is a significant community guy, but Jocko took him under the wing and empowered him.
Jock prepared me for this day.
Okay.
By going to, traveling with him, going to dinner with him, sitting across the table and him telling me, I'm not gonna be here forever. So sooner or later, you gotta step up to the plate and take over. Right. And you are capable of doing everything that I did because you was around me all the time. Right. So the decisions that you make is gonna be for your community. Right. Not for you personally, but for your community. Right.
Jocko was a father, a brother, an uncle, a mentor. Love Jock to the end of the earth. He coached me for the last 15 years of my basketball career. Summer League, 50 and over. Jocko's just a great guy, and I owe a lot of my success to Jocko. Because Jocko watched me down here since I was 14 years old. And I just want to give Jocko some big ups, man.
We have just everything that they want to do, we can do.
Where does your enthusiasm come from?
Because I can feel it coming back. There's this is a time right now where people are starting to get that hope back. Hope left a couple of years ago. Hope was out of here. But now hope is back in the neighborhood. Hope is here, and people are starting to see and starting to dream like they used to dream. You get a chance to dream the way these kids are dreaming and do the things that we're doing, then wow, I think it's going to happen real fast. It's going to happen pretty fast.
The city as a whole, man, had so much talent that the world was better off for it. These colleges were better off for it, pulling some of the talent from New York. New York was the Mecca.
Being the Mecca is defined by its players and its schools. We don't just say we're the Mecca because we're arrogant and, we just wanted to say that. I mean, during that time, we knew that Brooklyn basketball reigned, and that everybody wanted to either see or play against Brooklyn basketball. So when it comes to the high school ball, and let's just talk about the beginning of the era. I mean, 1974, 1975, we had Lafayette High School. Lafayette High School was ranked #1 in the country. Now, unfortunately, they lost in the city championship game to Taft High School. But the very next year, the same team came back and ranked #1 and 2 in the country was Lafayette and Canarsie High School, both Brooklyn high schools.
It was definitely a good matchup, and they did something that year that they normally don't do. Because two Brooklyn teams not supposed to play for the city championship.
They wanted us to clash. We had to play Canarsie. Canarsie had to play us.
We went in with the notion of we weren't going to leave 23-1.
We was on a mission. We had already lost one city championship, and we were juniors when we lost that. So as seniors, wasn't nothing going to get in our way.
Canarsie was undefeated. We had one loss. So, and if we would have beat them, we would have been the #1 high school team in the country.
You have all of these schools in the country, and you have two Brooklyn high schools ranked #1 and 2 going into the championship game, and it never would happen again because they don't want Brooklyn to play Brooklyn because Brooklyn's dominating high school basketball. So they changed the rules because of Lafayette and Canarsie. In 78-79, Boys and Girls High School wins the city championship, led by Richie Gordon, Mo Sanford. The general, Frank Mickens, Coach Mickens.
I've had a vision since the day I stepped in here, that we were going to move and we were going to move quickly.
Before Boys and Girls reached the championship win over Benjamin Cardoza, the last time they won the PSAL title was in 1979 under head coach Frank Mickens. Philosophically, the spirit of Frank Mickens is still alive in members of that 1979 championship team.
Well, Mickens was a different type of cat. Mickens didn't like the guys that was the gangsters, the hard rock ball players. You had to be a student with him.
After he won the city championship, stepped down, becomes the principal of Boys and Girls, and eventually becomes the high school principal of the year a few years later.
He's like the John Thompson of high school. He was an innovator. He was new, took chances. He didn't care about what the public says about him. He was his own person.
He was in really a very tough school, a very tough neighborhood, but nobody messed with Coach Mick.
So when Mickens was there, he was my coach as well as my dean.
Right.
And what he said was one day, he put a basketball and books at half court. He says, none of you suckers is going to pros. And as a young cat, we like, what you talking about, man? He says, I need you to get your education in case if you don't go to pros, you have something to fall back on.
I learned a lot from Frank Mickens in terms of his dedication, his hard work, and what he has. Don't worry about what the public says. Just be yourself. Do what you have to do to be successful and help other people. That was another thing that Frank Mickens and John Thompson had in life, helping other people in life as well.
My name's Kevin Woods. I played for Brooklyn, USA since 1978. You're running back then. Then I went down to Hamilton. We won a city championship. That's what the fuck we did.
Coach Ray Haskins.
Yeah, Coach Ray Haskins, yeah.
Hard.
That's what we did. These boys are nothing on us. Ran through them like Grant ran through Richmond.
Now, fast forward to 1980, 81, and what happens? Alexander Hamilton, led by the institution, Ray Haskins, wins the city championship. So Lloyd followed the path of being a rec coach, a youth coach, a tournament coach. Ray Haskins followed the path of being a organized coach, high school coach, and then ultimately a great college coach.
It goes back to Lester for me. Lester got me the job at Hamilton. In 1976, I became the JV coach there. And then the coach, Kenny Fiedler, left to go to Bushwick High School, so then I became the varsity coach. A lot of players came because they saw that I was a teacher. I didn't have to recruit them.
At Alexander Hamilton, there was talent that was older than me. Coach Sell, Nate Sims, Lionel King. Those were the upperclassmen when I first got on the team my sophomore year. And those guys were tough.
Ray is a hell of a coach. Tough-minded, man. I think our first practice with Ray, he wore us out. I couldn't bend my arms for a week.
The way Coach had us practice was physical. It was no crying involved, and it was just a physical environment.
A lot of kids that play in my biddy program, program, you know what I'm saying? So, it was much easier to help him. So when he gets the job, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna funnel my kids into this.
It was almost like an extension of Brooklyn, USA. Lloyd happened to be Ray's assistant. So we had both great coaches coaching us in high school. As a result of that, having great coaching, and then other great players around, you know, it was just a recipe for a championship.
My senior year, we had a meeting. We was like, listen, this is our last shot. You know what I'm saying? It's either do or die, swim or fly. If you can't swim, you're gonna drown. You know that.
While at Alexander Hamilton, I had a record of 179 and 16.
Almost every year of his high school career, he had an all-city player.
But you know was the key person that put us over the top? Andre Irvin.
You know, like I said, I came from the street, so I brought heart to the game. In basketball, is you have no fear. That's the way I put it to them, and that's how we did it.
And then Ray survives them closing the school down, which some believe it was closed down because he had too much talent.
He knew the meaning of hard work. He put us through the ringer, man. He taught us.
The institution is responsible for developing so many people's lives, including mine. He taught me how to referee basketball. He taught me about running tournaments. He taught me about being a good coach. One of the biggest supporters of the Ballside Middle documentary. So now from that 10-year period, we've had 3 city champions, and we had one team that lost in the city championship, but also appeared in it twice, which was Lafayette High School. But then we got to go to the private schools. You go to the private schools, in 1979, Nazareth High School wins the city championship, led by Stuart Granger, and a host of other guys like Arturo Brown. In 81, Chris Mullen leads Xaverian High School to the city championship. I believe in 83, Bishop Loughlin wins the city championship. So in the 10-year era, you had city champion runner-up Lafayette twice. You had city champion Canarsie, Nazareth, Xaverian, Bishop Loughlin, Boys and Girls, and Alexander Hamilton. That's 6 city champions and 1 runner-up. So a total of 7 teams appeared in the city championship game in the 10-year period. Now let's dial back into the players during that era. So in the early part of the era, we had All-Americans like Stretch Graham from Lafayette. We had Earl Nesbitt. We had Ron Chisholm, Fuller. Then we had the Canarsie crew that I mentioned earlier. We also had Boys and Girls, Richie Gordon, Mo Sanford. We had Larry Washington, who went on to play at St. John's from Canarsie. We had John Sally. We had Chris Mullen. We had Pearl Washington. We had Jerry Ice Reynolds, who, by the way, made it to LSU thanks to Lester Roberts. We had Beetle Washington. We had Roosevelt Chapman, who was an all-city player and wound up going to Dayton High School and becoming one of the greatest college players during the NCAA tournament, where he led Dayton all the way to the Elite Eight. There was something called the Suicide Division. My high school coach, Bob Sherman, who basically was one of the greatest coaches in New York City. He also won High School Coach of the Year in the early 90s in New York City, in all of New York City. He had to coach against Lafayette, Canarsie, Lincoln, Boys and Girls, Jefferson High School, Alexander Hamilton's high school, all trying to beat each other in the same division. They were murdering each other. Brooklyn was pushing out such great talent that they wanted to minimize our representation in the playoffs, and they were successful in doing that. So that's your high school scene. Now, in Brooklyn, which was great, we had a lot of colleges in Brooklyn. We had St. Francis, Brooklyn College, during the era, makes it to the Final Four, which was a phenomenal accomplishment, led by assistant coach Ted Gustis and probably the greatest high school coach in the era, Mark Reiner, who coached the undefeated teams at Canarsie.
I had a lot of good times there at Brooklyn College and with my fellow teammates.
You know, it was a good academic school. You're going to get a good education. When, you know, Mr. Reiner came and Ted Gustus came and Eisenberg, the team ended up really attracting players.
We also had LIU for the first time in the school's history. Downtown Brooklyn, LIU makes it to the NCAA tournament, led by a host of guys that came from other schools or came from Brooklyn high schools to represent. You had Earl Fuller, you had Eric Short, you had Rudy Johnson, you had Gerard Burns, Riley Clarita, Russ Davis. You had some great players at LIU. And they continued to win throughout the era when they added on Coach Ray Haskins and other players that came home to play for Brooklyn.
I never thought that I would come back and go to LIU, you know, but I seen a lot of my friends going there. When I went to junior college in Atlanta, you know, I thought I would go further, you know, had other offers. I wound up back at LIU.
So I wound up coming home because that's what I knew. That's where I wanted to be. At that time, I wasn't ready to be other places. So that's what brought me back to LIU.
And for me, I grew up in Lafayette Gardens, man, where my people come down there to Brooklyn to see me. So for me, it was that simple. And then I got to put it out there, and these guys know about it. We got checks every month.
My family came to every game.
Playing there, you know, was like, you know what, I'm home. It's a very comfortable environment. Playing there made it even better because the fellas from the neighborhood were coming to the games. So, you know, I got my own little section, and every single one of us had our own little section, about 20 guys, you know. All the fellas, whether it be the winos, I was giving tickets to everybody, you know. But the whole community were there to support me.
And the same thing he said about the stipend. I lived at home. It was a 20-minute train ride for me in Brooklyn. So LIU, I picked LIU.
There was opportunities to even play Division I basketball, and even at the junior college, Kingsborough Community College, New York Tech. Basketball continued to develop for guys at the high school in Brooklyn at these colleges. But one of the biggest things in the basketball community was tournaments, and to be able to play tournaments year round, whether it's in the winter or whether it's in the summer. And this is aside from high school ball or junior high school ball or college ball. This was community ball, and we cherished it. It was such an important and integral part of our development as young men, as well as basketball players. We had to be very active in the community.
I was playing high school basketball in Brooklyn, and there was talent everywhere. All of the schools had a Division I level player. And you were prepared because the summer tournaments that you played in prepared you for it. But people's reputations are created by playing originally as pickup ball. So over 30 parks in Brooklyn. And so you could be playing in Soul in the Hole in the early afternoon, Brevoort at 7 o'clock at night, or in the beach from 11 o'clock in the morning until maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then end up at the BRC, you know, the following day. And then down at Tillery in the afternoon, and then St. John's in the evening. The competition was just everywhere. Like I said, every school had a Division I level player. Some of them had 3 or 4 of them. And plus the guards were all of quality because they were taught by the same coaches, the same type of training. Those community coaches that were there for the players that played for the team, they also had people that weren't on the team. I know when I played for George Murden, we had like 25, 30 people at practice. So you honed your skills, whether you were a top player or not. And I know in my environments, everybody was treated equally. Everybody had to run. Everybody had to do push-ups. You had to bring your A game every time you got on the court.
I'm going to give you one example, and there are 3 tournaments that really resonate during that era. Now, don't get me wrong, and not to disrespect the 50 or 60 other tournaments that people had played in that era, but 3 tournaments during that era really stood out to me. One was definitely Boothe. The Boothe Sports Foundation in the heart of Bed-Stuy, in the heart of the Boothe projects, with lights on at night. We had a Coliseum, they called it, and the best talent in Brooklyn. Also Manhattan, New Jersey, Queens, Philadelphia, Baltimore, all came to play in Boothe. In the early 70s, this was the #1 basketball tournament in Brooklyn. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The Coliseum is still here though. It's great to see the Coliseum still set up in the lights and everything. It's still here.
New York was the Mecca. I mean, I love playing at Boothe, you know? That to me, that was a hell of a place to play.
If you were somebody, you played in Boothe.
Mr. Hank Trotman was one of the founders of the Boothe basketball tournament, better known as the Boothe Sports Foundation.
To have a project like I wanted to start with basketball because the grounds, the facilities were already there. And I said to them, why can't we put something together that's worth not just a basketball tournament, something that's special and unusual.
One of the greatest tournaments I ever played in. Great crowds, great competition. Some of the best basketball I've ever seen.
This was our Rucker. And if you know anything about the Rucker up in Harlem, this was our Rucker. We had the same type of crowd, people sitting on fences, people all over the place.
We had more bicycles outside our tournament grounds than most tournaments had people.
And I remember as a kid watching Sam Worthen put in some work. And that's the first time I saw Sam Worthen play. His vision, his leadership, his ability to run a team was phenomenal. I was so fixated on Sam Worthen that I decided at that very moment I was going to pattern my game after Sam Worthen. I became, to some, Baby Sam.
We just didn't want anybody coming in. We wanted kids who were really concerned and who wanted to really participate in basketball on a high-level basis.
The second tournament that we have to talk about, and I mentioned it when I talk about Lester Roberts, is citywide. I mean, from 9, 10 years old all the way through 17, the competition in citywide was incredible. And when I played for Gil, I played in citywide in Queens as a junior, but I played in Brooklyn citywide twice. And I'm telling you, just the environment, the atmosphere, you can make a name for yourself again. We like tournaments where you can make a name for yourself, that after you play and you do well, Brooklyn's talking about you. Making a name for yourself then means every time you play, people are going to come watch you, and now you got to step up, and you got to do the same thing or do better. And that pressure made you a better basketball player, made you more competitive, made you more talented. But the last tournament, and I didn't play in this tournament until I got out of college, which was in 1984, was Soul in the Hole. Now, Soul in the Hole, just the name itself, just resonates. Soul in the Hole.
They don't even need a court to play ball. They'll just play on the sidewalk, play in the street, play anywhere. That's how it is here. BK, where the basketball is the best. And in the place to be, as you can plainly see.
Soul in the Hole was the pro Rucker of Brooklyn. I'll put you like that.
Everybody knew about Soul in the Hole. I didn't care where you could be uptown in the Rucker, you could be anywhere. Soul in the Hole, in my opinion, in 1983, was the best tournament in New York City.
It started with the Niles brothers, and Ray Haskins and a few other people started this Soul in the Hole tournament in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Now, when they started it, pro players actually played in Soul in the Hole. Soul in the Hole was jumping.
Back then, I can remember sitting in 44 as a little kid, man, watching NBA guys in 44 Park.
Soul in the Hole was the second Pro-Am tournament that was started in Brooklyn.
Now, there's 3 versions of Soul in the Hole. There's the original that happened prior to our era, that happened probably in the early 70s, late 60s. And then there is the one from the Ballside Middle era, around 1980 to about 1986. Third one, which is the movie Soul in the Hole, that featured Kenny Kings and a lot of other great basketball players.
When he played power forward for me, he had Jerry curls.
Yeah, but he good, man.
He had that coming to America look.
Yeah, but Soul in the Hole was one of the roughest. That was the best tournament in Brooklyn at that time.
They had 23 teams. 22 of the teams were loaded.
Yeah, everybody came.
Everybody was loaded. There was no weak teams in Soul in the Hole.
Did not go to no tournament, no BS, because you get blowed out. And we did it to some teams.
You had to come correct here. You know, don't come at all, because you'd be embarrassed. You wouldn't be able to go back home. You know, you'd hear about it for years. So.
No matter which era of Soul in the Hole, it was crazy packed. Every major game, especially the playoffs and the championship.
Well, he's talking about the there goes our coach, too.
I just want to say we're the only team that went undefeated in Soul.
No, I went undefeated. Oh, they did? See, they went after us.
Yeah, after y'all won it. I went.
What team?
We're not in Brooklyn. We're Healy, Costa, no sin, what do you have to do with that shit?
Don't worry about that. That was after us.
Me.
That's after us. Coach, know that.
Coach.
That was after us. That's after us. That was the younger stuff. That was after us.
You know why they broke up Soul in the Hole? Because of the violence.
Yeah.
It got so bad where they started shooting here. Yeah. And people started running away, so the city of New York said, you know what? Take away one of the courts.
That's what they did. Put a handball court.
You put a handball court there. You know, we didn't have that. We were more together. Yeah. You know. And the thing I liked about Soul in the Hole, when the games was over, we used to sit right up here and we used to laugh, talk, and joke. Yeah, until it got dark. You know, we didn't talk no violence, we didn't talk nothing. We talked about the game. It was a decent conversation. Now, you know, these kids today over here, especially over here, it's too much killing going on.
I do want to say that those 3 tournaments are 3 that really stick out for me. Not disrespecting the 50 or so other tournaments that we played in or won, but those 3 tournaments really showed why Brooklyn was the Mecca of basketball. To sum up a Mecca, what we did in the era, we took a look at the NBA encyclopedia and we said, you know, how many Brooklyn Knights that played high school ball in Brooklyn actually played in an NBA game, suited up, wore NBA uniform between the years 1975 and 1985. 32 individuals that played their high school basketball in Brooklyn played for an NBA team during that era. That doesn't count the numerous, probably twice as many that were drafted. That doesn't even include the ABA guys, because there was a couple in the ABA. Fly Williams, Roger Brown. 32, it's never been done or heard from. Well, let's just say from 2000 to 2020, in a 20-year period, we only had 16. 16 Brooklynites in the NBA. And of the 16, only 8 of them played at a high school in Brooklyn. So you see the decline. But back in our era, 32 individuals and Hall of Famers. What else can we say?
People who cared about kids. Lester Roberts, who owned a sporting goods store, would spend his own money to buy team uniforms and drive us to tournaments in Baltimore and other locales. Gil Reynolds, the consummate coach, who taught me the fundamentals of the game and to respect the game and your teammates.
What he was, what Jay-Z was for Brooklyn. He was that for Brooklyn then.
Two words, New York City. That's home, always will be. Great memories, great basketball players come out of there.
Edwards gives it up. Sally with one on the clock. Oh, heartbreaker for Chicago. He ran all 24 seconds and then drilled it.
The time. Wittenberg. Oh, that's a long way.
So when I put it all together and I'm doing this film and I'm just saying, I have managed to accomplish and do everything that Lester did and the way he did it, because he also left Brooklyn and gave Brooklyn to Baton Rouge. Coach Boothe left Brooklyn and gave Brooklyn to Virginia. But the one thing that connects our soul and why I anchored the story at St. John's and why the first person I needed to talk about in the history of Brooklyn basketball during the ball side middle era, which is Lester's drill, ball side middle. And it is the first drill I give to everyone in Virginia. The spiritual connection to this man was that he left the earth on November 29th, the very day I was born, November 29th. So many parallels, so many of the same journeys, same actions. And at the end of the day, he leaves on November 29th, 1998. But I was born on November 29th. And I discovered that during the filming of Ballside Middle. Lester Roberts is, in my opinion, the executive producer of Ballside Middle. And he's doing it from heaven. But he's been preparing me for this moment ever since I met him at 14 years old. Can't be explained any other way.